Advanced Functions of Excel Formulas, Part 2. Now, we all had a great time on Part 1 that ran about 2 weeks ago, and are really excited about today's session. If you happen to have missed Part 1, not a problem. This session isn't a continuation or a more advanced session. It's really just covering more formulas. So today we have with us Denis Laflamme. Denis has been a Microsoft certified trainer with us for over 10 years, teaching Office courses such as Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Access, Outlook, OneNote, as well as Visual Basic Programming. So if you combine all of that hands-on experience that he's acquired over the years, excellent presentation skills, I can guarantee that you're all in for a very productive hour.
We're going to work on different subjects today. So here they are. As Carl mentioned, this file will be available for download in a link right under the video. So we're going to look at array formulas today and just different variations. We're also going to talk about the subtotal feature. And as you can see here, I have each subject on a tab so that you can come and practice, or if you have any questions, you can focus on that specific tab. So we have date and time functions, just playing a little bit with those so that if you have data that you need to extract or that you need to clean up. We'll also talk about the concatenate versus flash fill, because as we all know in Excel, we always have some new features that show up, and flash fill is something that just came up. We will talk about index and match versus VLookup. I might just skip directly to VLookup and forego the index and match, but we'll still give you a few opportunities. I might not explain as much. Last time I spent a bit more time on this, and it wasn't, we almost ran out of time. We'll talk about the round functions and some different variations that we have on that. And we'll talk about using table references in formulas so that we really make sure that our data is always treated as consistently as possible. So array formulas. Well, what does array mean? I think I can zoom in a little more here. Yeah. So an array is a group of things. So basically a value, text, or true-false results stored in a range of cells or in memory. So for our case, it's in a range of cells. So for instance, this here would be an array, right? If we had two arrays, we could say, well, we have those two here. So the difference between a standard formula in a cell and an array formula, so where we're using an array inside a formula, is that the standard formula does the operation on one cell or one value, whereas, or if you go to an array formula, well, the operation, and actually, let me just make this a little bit wider so you can actually read. What's going to happen is that in an array formula, instead of having, 16 times 12 like this, or D13 times C13 or whatever the cell references, the array formula is going to do the operation and basically do this array here multiplied by this array here. So basically, it's kind of like saying all of this times all of this, and then put it somewhere else, right? So as we saw in our first session, if I want to enter a formula in all of these, then I would highlight all of these. So this is where I want all the sales total. And then basically, I could just come and go equals this times, right? So Shift 8, this, and then press Control Enter. And that would give me a regular formula. But that's not an array formula. To be able to enter the curly brackets, if you will, you can't just type them in. You have to use Control and Shift and Enter simultaneously, right? So if we undo this, right, and then basically we can just highlight these, and then we can just highlight both of the, so we'll highlight this, equals, and then we'll highlight this, multiply by, and then we'll highlight these, right? So now what I'm saying is everything that's in B7 to B13 times everything that's in C7 to C13. But if I want the linear formula to go across, what I'm going to do is you Control Shift Enter, right? So Control Shift and then Enter, and automatically you'll now see here, if we edit this formula, that I have the curly brackets here, which means that I have entered an array formula. All right, so it's not very complicated. If I wanted to have a sum of all of these, right? So let's do a few verifications, right? So the keyboard shortcut for the sum is Alt equals, right? So Alt equals, and automatically, because I'm entering the sum, it looks at the numbers above me and says, would you like to total that? I'll press Control Enter, so this way I stay on the same cell, right? And of course, if I wanted to, if the numbers had not been already in currency format, I could have used Control Shift and then 4, and that would have automatically set this to currency. Okay. Now, I could also, let's say that I want this sum here for this calculation, but I don't want to go through all of this calculation. I could use what's called sum product, right? So if we go equal sum product, and again, remember that whenever you're seeing a formula that shows up, or a function that shows up, as soon as it's highlighted what you want, you can just press Tab and automatically pop that up for you with the first bracket. And as you can see now, it's explaining to you how it works, right? So this is a recipe, and the ingredients are always going to be in between the brackets, and the ingredients are always going to be separated by commas. So now we have here some product, and then we say, all right, I want this array, right? So it says array 1, and then comma, and then array 2. So my array 2 is this one here, right? So now I'll close my bracket, Control Enter, and I have my result verified here. Remember, Control Shift plus 4, so Control Shift and 4, and automatically I get the currency. So it's a little shorter than coming up here and actually going to pick the currency, right? So basically we have this result here, and then we could do just the array formula for, depending on the sum product. So I could do equals sum, right? So Alt equals, right? Excuse me, escape, Alt equals, and then say range 1, right? So range 1, and then multiplied by range 2, right? And then Control Shift Enter, and we get again the same result, right? So now I'll just go Control Shift and number 4, and I have my currency, right? So we've done this 3 ways. We've multiplied this by this in an array, right? So we have this by this, and then by doing Control Shift Enter, it does the array for the entire cells. We have it inserted in a sum product, right? Which is basically add the product of this. Now, whenever you get into a function, if you want a little bit more explanation about where and what the values are, you can always click on the function insert function button, and that will open an argument window. And basically, it explains to you when you click in the window what this is. So if I click on array 1, it says, well, array 1 to array 255 is where you want to multiply and then add. And it basically gives you all the explanation. Depending on the function you're using, you're going to always have different explanations for some windows. And if you wanted help on this function, you could conveniently click on help on this function, and that would actually open the instruction book for this function. And not only does it have the syntax, right, the recipe for the book, for the function, but it also has examples, so that if you want to make sure that you're getting the right details, you could actually highlight the information, copy, paste it in a blank sheet, and then test it out. So all the information is already there. You don't even have to go to YouTube or the information is already in here. Of course, there's some stuff that has some tweaks, and this is why sometimes when we spend time in a classroom, we'll spend a little bit more time in this in this window here, just to make sure that we've covered all the variables. Okay, that's enough talking for the rest of the how-tos. So if any questions appear on this subtotal, I would say just don't have you can also, of course, have the functions go in a horizontal manner as opposed to a vertical manner. Sorry, but if you want to just copy this information and then you just want to transpose it here, right? This is another way to transpose the information in an array. You can copy the information, right? So Control C or right click and copy. And then if you go to the first cell where you want to paste, when you paste here, there's a transpose, right? That actually converts whatever you copied and transposes it here, right? So of course, you can use the actual transpose function, right, if you wanted to, but the copy and paste is going to be where the first cell from the first cell is going to transpose, right? I could come in here and go equal transpose, and that transpose will automatically take whatever's in here and transpose it over there. So if I did transpose here, right, I could highlight that, and then it would just basically, if I drag my my function, then it'll automatically transpose wherever the cell is going. Okay, so the transpose is a function that's going to make it permanently. The difference is that if I have data that needs to update frequently, then I'm going to use a function. If I don't need to use something that's going to update, I just need to copy it and paste it in one direction. I can just highlight my information, Control C, right click, and go to the transpose, and automatically it would transpose the information here. Okay, nice and easy on that one. Now let's move on to subtotals. One of the things that I frequently see when people are working with data is that they just have the headers of a table. They have the information listed in a table-like format, but they actually don't take the time to convert the information into an actual Excel table. And what that means is that this is a layer on top of the data that uses Excel functionalities that make the table work much easier. So, sorry, the one way to do this is to highlight the data, right? So Control A, right? Control All will highlight the data. And then what you can do is press Control T, and then creating a table will enable you to have features in the function in the table that will enable you to extract numbers. So the only question that it's asking me here is my table has headers. So does my table have headers here? Yes, it does. So I want you to treat those as headers. If I click on OK, then automatically this has now been converted into a table. And as you can see, right, if I press Control arrow down, then I get to the bottom of my table. I have 113 lines. If I want to go up, Control arrow up brings me to the top of my table. And now you see that because I've converted this area into a table, I have table tools, right? If I click in here, not in the table, no table tools. If I click in the table, automatically my table tools appear, and I have a bunch of different things that I can come here and do, right? So for instance, when we're talking about just basic totals, right? So let's go to the bottom, right? And at the bottom, you'll see right now, I don't have any results, right? I'm outside of the table. But if I look in my table tools, right, here are different style options that can have. And we could talk about the more graphic, features later on. But one of the really cool features is the total row here. And this total row enables me to quickly say, you know what, I'd like to have a total on the number of units that I've sold overall. And so I'm going to have a sum, and I get a drop down here in each of the columns, enabling me to use the total without having to create any type of or write in any type of function or formula. So if I wanted the average sales, well, I can just go to average, and automatically it's going to give me the average number here, right? If I want to check that, then I'm going to click here, Control Shift arrow up, right? We'll select all of the data, and I see that my average here is 809.87, right? So this is the automatic counting that happens when you highlight more than 2 cells, right? If I highlight 2 cells, it says I highlighted 2, the average is this, numerical count, minimum, and all of that. But if I highlight the entire column, then it says your average is 809, right? Let me just get rid of that one here. right? Go back up, control arrow up, and then control shift arrow down, selects the whole column, and my average is 809.87. Come in here, say average 809.87, that's perfect. Okay, so my column here is not wide enough. I'm just going to double click on the separator to make it the width that it needs to be. And I see that my grand total for cost of goods sold is 38,375, right? So I could have standard deviations, I can have all of these automatic, and of course, clicking on the more function will give you more functions, or basically every single function that's inside of Excel that you can use to be able to get the results at the bottom here. So very, very easy to dress up the totals in your column, in your table. Now, if I go back to the top, Control Shift Arrow top, of course, there's a few other things here that you can do, and those are aesthetic things, right? So do you want to have the header row seen or not? Do you want the first column to be formatted differently, right? So if I go to the bottom here, let's say, here, I'll take something a little bit brighter and orange, yellow, there you go. So do I want my first column to be done, differently? Do I want my banded rows or banded columns, right? So this is banded rows, this is banded columns, and then do I want my last column to have a different format? And do I want to see those filter buttons, right? So let's say that I'm printing this and I copy paste into some sort of more refined document, then I might want to just remove the filter button so that it looks good. All right. So Control Z, 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 Z. We're just going to remove all of those modifications. Control Z, Control Z, and just hold the Control Z and do the undo until I get to where I was exactly. Of course, I can come in here and just select all of the undo, and then I can undo whatever number of actions I've just did. Now the other one that we don't that we have a benefit for having a table is a slicer, right? So the slicer, and I know we're supposed to talk about subtotals, but this is at the end of this conversation. So basically, I have here, all of my my totals lined up, and I say, well, I want to be able to either pick a region, a sales rep, or a different product. Well, because I'm in a table, I can now insert some tools that I have here, like a slicer, and I could say, for instance, okay, let's add a product slicer, let's add a region slicer, and let's add a sales slicer. I'm adding 3, and here we have our 3 slicers now that have basically the information in here, and I can say, well, okay, why don't you just show me what the Chin did? And Chin did this much. Now, do you remember that I had put the units, the sales average here, and then the total of cost of goods? And you'll notice that this now automatically updates depending on who I pick here. So I say, Chin and Franks, what do you guys do? Well, if I go to the bottom of this here, now my total is adjusted, and it shows me only these results, right? So if I want to clear my slicer, all I have to do is just click on the X and the red X, and then it'll do that. And of course, I can control click. So I say Smith, and then I press the control button, Fam, and Chin, and then I have these 3 sales rep here that have results. And if I go control arrow down, I have my average, my quantity, and my cost of goods sold. Control arrow up. Of course, I can combine some of these. So I say, who sold quads, and who sold quads in the East? And what did Chin do? Well, Chin sold 1 quad in the East, and then Franks, he sold 3, and then Go or Fam or Sue or Smith, right? As I'm changing the sales rep here, these will also adjust, right? So you see how if I click on Smith, Smith has sold quads, Sunsets, and Sunshine, but he hasn't sold any of these products, nor has he sold anything in the South because they're grayed out, right? So because I'm clicking on something here, it will gray out the automatically the other ones. And then I can just, of course, remove all of my filters. So slicers, really, really cool tool, right? And then you also have, when you do this in a pivot table, if you ever start working with pivot tables, there's a great full day course, by the way, on pivot tables that makes you really appreciate all the power of Microsoft pivot tables, and including Power Pivot. You'll have timelines. So you'll be able to not only have a slicer in the top and bottom direction, but you'll have a slicer at the top that basically looks like a timeline, and you can pick by month, by year, or whatever you want to pick by. Of course, you know, you can change the color of your slicers, and you can change the width of the slicers. You can change how many columns you have in each of these, right? At the top, you have the slicer tools. So click on the table tools, click on the slicer tools, right? Of course. And so you can make it nice and pretty. So if you're ever given a report to someone that's, how do we say in a polite way, Excel challenged, then the person you're handing in the report to, you can just say here, and you could have the year in here, or, you know, whatever department and things like that. And then you say, okay, you know, if you want to just know what's going on, well, you go to Sunshine East for FAM, and automatically your data is going to be filtered. To be able to use these, you have to have your data in a table. Okay. Now, the actual subject of the sheet is subtotals, because there is a subtotal feature. The subtotal feature will not work if your data is in tables. So exactly what I did, but the opposite. So to go back to a table that isn't in a table format, but just has raw data, what we're going to do is we're going to convert this table to range, right? So click convert to range. Do you want to convert this table to range? Yes, please. And then all the table tool features are gone, okay? So now what I want to do is I would like to have a subtotal for all of the sales per region, right? So the first thing I want to do is make sure that my data is sorted, right? So I'll go data, A to Z or Z to A, right? So making sure that my data is sorted per region, per sales rep, or whatever data you want to group as a subtotal. Now, if I wanted a subtotal for East, of course, you know, some people would come in here, right click, do insert, and then put a sum in there, right? So alt equals and all of that stuff. Well, that's nice, but unfortunately, if I have, you know, 10,000 lines of data, that might be a little long and might take my entire afternoon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the actual subtotal function or option that is inside of Excel in the outline group, right? So to find the subtotal, you go to the data tab, right? And then you'll go to the subtotal. Very important that your cursor is inside the table, because if I click here and I press subtotal, it will say, sorry, dude, I don't see any tables, so I can't help you. So now we're going to click on our table. It doesn't really matter where. I make a habit of clicking on the first record. There's no advantage to this except that I know where my cursor is. And so we'll click on subtotal. And so now Excel is going to ask me some questions, right? It's going to say, all right, at each change in. So it's looking at the headers, right, which is really important to have. At each change in which column? So basically what it's saying is, let's say if I say at each change in date, then it's going to say, this is not the same, I'm going to add a subtotal here. This is not the same, I'm going to add a subtotal here. So in this case, for instance, if I said add each change in product, it would say same, different, add a subtotal. So now you understand why it was important for us to sort our data so that we have same, and then if I scroll down, different, subtotal here, and it's going to add up everything that's up here, okay? So subtotals at each change in region. What do I want to do? Well, I'd like to have a sum. So I want to have a total. And what do I want to total? I want to total the units, the total sales, and the total cost of goods. So units, sales, and cost of goods. Now, there are a few other options. If there were subtotals there already, I could say replace the current subtotals or not. I could also add a page break, so that if I was printing this report, it would automatically force a page break in around every subtotal. And then do I want to see the summary below the data? So at the bottom, do I want to have a grand total? I'll leave those out. I'll leave those in and click on OK. And now it says, okay, well, same. Here's an East total here, right? Oops, my column is not wide enough. Double click here. My column is not wide enough. So I have a subtotal. Let's see if it did it for Midwest. Yes, it did. And then it did it for South. Yes, it did. And it did it for West. And it also gave me a grand total with the grand count. Now, there's another thing that it did, right? So that worked very well. You can imagine that if I have let's say, you know, a product category, and I have 50 different categories, and somebody asks me to make the total sales for that category, all I have to do is just put my category in order, sort it, and then add a subtotal, pick the right columns, and I'm good. The other thing it did, see, this is an outline function, right? Is it created groups, right? So there are 3 levels of groups, right? Because there's only, there's basically the 3rd level here, which is all of the data. The 2nd level, which is only the subtotals, right? And then the 1st level, which is only the grand total. Now you see there's a little plus here. So if I click on the plus, I have, for instance, the opportunity to come and say, well, how about we expand just the south here? So I'll click on the plus, and then automatically this is just the data for the south, right? So I'll zoom back up a bit just so you can see, right? I did that with my control and wheel, of course. I'm sure you all know that, but if you want to zoom in, zoom out, right? Use the control key on your keyboard, turn the wheel of the mouse in and out, and then you'll be able to zoom in, zoom out. That works on anything that's got zoom features, Excel, Word, Internet Explorer, Chrome, etc. So let's collapse now, then zoom in a bit. All right, now I have my subtotal, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to paste only my subtotals, right? So if I copy this, right, and I come here and I paste, right? Now, I'll have the opportunity to select only the data that's displayed here. Now, Excel 2016 does that in a basic, in a more intuitive way. Before, what you had to do is you had to select the data and then go to special, right? So you needed to go on the home tab and do find and select and go to special. And then you would say, and you might have that at some point when you're doing filtering, select the visible cells only, right? And then what it does is it doesn't select all of the data. It selects only the visible cells that have been highlighted. And then when I copy and paste those, let's say here, then the only thing that I have here is the data, right? So if I paste this in a Microsoft Word document, then automatically I would have a link to the file, right? So you've probably seen this, but let's just make sure you all know. If I copy data from Microsoft Excel and I paste it in Microsoft Word, right, then what's going to happen is that when I paste it, it's going to say, here are some control options, right? Do you want to just paste the destination style, so what's in here, the source styles, or do you want to keep a link, right? So if I go here and I say keep a link, what's going to happen is that if I change my data, then the Excel here is, sorry, because I closed that. Not too sure what happened for this one, but we'll just reopen that. So when you're pasting inside of Microsoft Word, what happens is that you'll be able to have a link so that if the data changes inside of Excel, then it'll come and update instead of Microsoft Word. So if you're already building on a document, that'll be great. Okay, so that's the subtotal formulas, right? So we're using data, subtotals in a non-table format, or we are Control-T the table and then be able to add some total rows to be able to use whatever function we would like at the bottom here, okay? More date and time functions. Nice and easy in Excel. You have functions that already exist, right? So let's understand first what is a date, right? So this here is today's date, right? So why do I know that this is today's date? Well, because first of all, I kind of cheated. I looked in here and it says equal today. So the function is called today. Today is going to give you today's date. So if you have a report, for instance, where you have an expense report and you always want to make sure that it's the current date that shows up at the top of your expense report, you just go equal today, and then today doesn't have any ingredients, so you'll just do bracket, bracket, close. You need the brackets, there's just no ingredients in there, and then you press enter, and automatically it gives you today, right? Now, because today is a date, it automatically pushes it as a date format. But if I change this date into general, it says 43,138. So when we're in a class, I say, if you can figure it out, I'll get free lunch. But since there's a few more people that I can buy lunch to, I'll just explain it to you. There's 43,000. Well, actually, let me just do this. I'll press 1, right? And I'll give you this, right? So if I change 1 into a date format, right? What does it say? January 1st, 1900. So basically today, right? If I go to today, bracket, and I show this in numbers, today is the 43,138th day since January 1st, 1900, right? We have today, we have now, which basically adds the date and time. We have the year function, the month function, the day, end of month, end of date, and then of course, just date. If you want more information about formulas or functions that have date flavors, then you can just go to the formulas tab, and in here they've gathered them in categories, and you have time and date. If you want to learn anything about this or just get a quick overview, well, you can just scroll to days 360. If you hover over it without clicking, it'll say, this returns the number of days between two dates based on a 360-day, 12, 30-day month calendar. If you want to know what that is, ask Google. It's a bit more involved in explanation, but basically the average is days 360. So if you want to know what month does, well, you hover over it and basically it returns the month in a number format. So we're going to use some of these here. So for instance here, right, days late. Well, if I know that a date is a number, then this date here is an actual number. So if I go equals, right, this date, which is the end date, minus this date here, press enter, I know that my person is 5 days late, right? If I wanted to know the difference in dates, obviously because I'm subtracting, right, I need to make sure that I subtract the bigger number to the smaller number from the bigger number. So I'll go equals, and then this date minus this date, and voila, I have my number of days. Of course, if I want to see number of days total, I would need to add +1, right? Just basic math. And so this, because we need to include the date, right? There's a difference, but we need to add +1 because there's 6 days total. And then, of course, if I wanted to, if you have a 30, 60, 90-day kind of format, then you could just say equals this plus the number of days. And of course, then that would give you, days added here. Now, if you had that, you could also have to say equals today, right? And so now every time today is added, then you can say, what's 10 days from today, right? So if I have, let's say 30, 60, 90 days, right? Well, I could say, 30, enter, 60, enter 90 days, right? And I could say equals today, and it's always going to be today, so I'll press F4 to make sure that it's an absolute value, and I'll add it to my 30 days, press enter, and then I can just double click to autofill, the autofill button, and then what I know is that every time I come here and I look at my 30, 60, 90 days, these are the 3 dates that are going to represent those, okay? So rapidly, and I know this is going quick, don't worry about it. You don't have to, I can hear some people go, whoa, it's going too fast. That's fine. This is a free webinar for an hour. We're trying to cover as much as possible. Obviously, this would probably be a segment that would last probably half an hour in a classroom environment. So, if you do want to spend some more time on specific things, once you're in a classroom, you can just ask the teacher and we'll or the instructor, and we'll spend some time with you. So again, today, bracket, right? Now, there's tab, right? So this is 2:34 here local time. And then we can have different features for end of month, same day, next month, and I'll show you these in a minute. Just want to point out that this here is going to recalculate every time something is updated, right? So it's really important to understand that this is not fixed value. This is a value, and as soon as the data is updated inside of here, then the data will update. Okay, these cells will update. So great for variables if you want to make sure that it stays that way. If not, then you need to copy and paste the right number. End of month, right, basically tells you what date is at the end of this month. And of course, it includes this leap year, right? So if I go equals EO, end of month shows up, press tab. It says, well, where's your start date? Well, my start date is September 13th, 2017. And then comma, that's how my recipe works. And then it says, how many months? Well, 0 is to this month, press bracket. And so if I press enter, now, and did you see how that updated here? So now it says in September, the month is the 30th is the end of the month. And as I go to September 2017, sorry, September 2017, the 30th is the month there, right? So end of month is going to go and look for the last day of this month because I put a 0. Now there's a variable. If I use a -1, then it's going to go back 1 month. So what's the end of the month, the last day of the end of the month preceding September 13th? And that's August 31st, right? Of course, in the other direction, if I went +1, then it would be next month. I actually need to put a 1 in there. And then automatically it would go to October 31st, right? So quickly be able to find what the date is for the end of the month. Same thing for same day next month, right? So again, equals the date, right? So press tab, what's the date? And then next month, right? So we'll press 1, close the brackets, control enter, and then the same day next month is going to be October 10th here. And then basically I could show this as a date if I wanted to, right? So the same day today, next month, okay? Higher date minus number of years, of course, right? So if I go equals, now I can add different numbers to different dates. And if I want to extract, now this is involved. So there's 3 different subjects in this one formula here, right? The first one is a date, right? So the date function basically is going to build a date for you, right? So if I go date 2004, comma 2, comma 2, then automatically it's going to give me the date. The reason that we're using this is because sometimes we want to extract things, or we want to add different elements, and we're going to put variables instead of actual numbers, or we're not going to hard code anything in here, right? Because that wouldn't be very useful. So if I have this number here, right, somebody extracted a number and they just sent me a bunch of dates in a CSV file and they didn't split it, but I need to be able to do some date calculations, then what I'm going to have here is using the date function, right? So equals date, and then what it says is year, month, and day. So year is going to be this cell here, and then we're going to use the left, mid, and right function, right? So the left function basically says, tell me where the number is, and once you've found where that text is, tell me how many characters you want from the left. So the text here is in this cell, so that's the first variable, and then how many characters do I want? 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Because you remember in the date function, I'm using the year, so this is the first number. All right, so I have left A39, and I want the first 4 digits. Then it says, in my date, it's the month. The month is number or position 5 and position 6, right? So again, my month here is going to be the text. Where's the text? Now in the mid, there's an extra variable, which is the start, right? So which is the start character? And the reason that it says start number here, but and number characters, right? So this is the start number is the position. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And then how many characters do I want, including the 5th character? So 2. So I get these 2. So that's 0, 7. And then if I go to my right, then the last 2 digits here represent the day, right? Which is again the format in my date function. So year, month, and day. So now if I come in here, text number, the text is here. How many characters from the right this time, right? So then I go 1, 2, right? So although even it's going backward, it's still going to use 14 as the number, right? So now press enter, and it shows me the date here. The difference is that now this is an actual date format, so then I could see, you know, a short date, I could have a long date, I could have whatever. Whereas if I come in here and I just punch date, then it's not going to work, right? It's going to it's not going to recognize this as a formatable date. Of course, I would use my autofill, and then all of those dates would automatically line up. Okay, so date functions. A bunch of different ways that we can use that. So I'm going to spend an extra, let's say, 3 minutes on this. So when we have a table, right? Well, we have a date here, and then we wanted to extract the year, right? So what do? Well, we said equals year of here, right? And then that gives me the year. Why do I want to do this? Well, because let's say that I don't want to use a pivot table and I don't want to use timelines. I just want to be able to display the information here and then potentially do subtotals or just crunch the data very quickly to be able to have totals up here. Then I can do this in a table. Of course, you would eventually upgrade your reasoning to a power pivot or just a plain pivot table. Once again, you know, that's definitely something that's worth taking the time. And of course, to a certain point, going with Power BI, which is the business intelligence tool that enables you to visualize your data in a much prettier way. So what do I want here? I have 5 days. I want to know what the biggest sales are, or the biggest days are in our sales. I don't have this in my data here, right? And then what are the total sales for each year, right? And then what are the total sales for each quarter? Well, so this is where we're talking about modeling data, right? There's kind of 3 steps when you're talking about manipulating data. The first is cleaning up the data, so to make sure that, you know, these are all numbers and these are all letters and these are all in the right format of dates and everything like that. So you can use the Concatenate and flash fill for that. And then we want to model the data so that there might be extracting information from here, right? So if I want the year, I do year here. So I'm going to just come down here, and this will extract all of the years, right? Why do I need this? Because eventually I'm going to come here and go sum if any of these numbers when it's this year, right? So same thing for the month, double click. Same thing for the day, double click. Same thing for the month name. Now, if you remember month name, actually you don't remember because I didn't tell you. The text value, right? The text function is a function that returns text depending on a number, right? So if I say text A1, so as whatever's in A1, and then just show me this, then this is what it's going to give me as an example. But there are, if we scroll down to the different options here, there are different variables that you can use in the text function, right? So we have value, and then we have the text format. Well, the text format, if I use M, double M, triple M, quadruple M, or 5, then it'll display the month either as a number, an abbreviation, the full name, or just a letter. And same thing for days, and same thing for years, right? So if I want the number of the month, then I can use just M. If I want the actual month's name, then I can use 4 M's, right? So that's what I'm doing here. So I say, if I delete this, right, I go equals, where's the month? The month is here. And then, I'm sorry, I need to actually use the text function. And then where's my value? Well, the value that I want is the value for the month, because I want the month's name. And then what do I want? I want 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So obviously, excuse me, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's my format. And then I do that. So basically what's going to happen is, I'm not too sure what I entered here. So basically you have the value that's in the number here. So in the date, oh, it's because I actually took month's number. So take this value here and just display this value as just the month's name. Okay, so here's our gent month. Same thing for the day name, right? So I'm going to have this. Now, if you can see, there's an inconsistency here between this one and this one, because this one's, excuse me for 1 second. So I have my day name. Right, you remember why I want the month name or the day name is because I want to be able to total these somehow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here and I'm going to modify so that instead of having just 3 days, I'm going to have 4 Ds, and that is going to use the actual day here, right? So extract this, I get the month here. Extract this, I get the days. Same thing for the quarter. Basically, if you want to know what quarter is you're going to take the month and then you divide it by 3, and it's basically it's going to enable you to, if you round it up to 0, it's going to be able to round up which quarter it's in, right? So this is in first quarter, and this is just a join, right? So basically, use the letter Q and the first number of the letter, or the whatever's in this quarter, and then the ampersand joins things, right? So this here, this symbol here, so it says basically take the Q, which is in quotes, use this number and the dash and whatever year it is. So automatically, that's going to join Q1 dash 2016, right? I've left this example in the template, so if you need to construct it backwards, you can do that. So double click on the autofill, it's going to punch it in. Double click on the autofill, it's going to punch it in. Now, I want to sum if this. So basically, I want to know which day is good. So equals sum if, and then sum range. So where's the range that I want to sum? All right, and then comma the criteria range. So Monday here, my criteria range is here. Control arrow down, and then what's the actual criteria? Well, the actual criteria is this one here. Close the bracket, and then it says 3631. Is there a way for me to quickly do this? Well, how about I sort these? Of course, I could do a subtotal, right? And then I take all the Mondays, and that wasn't a table, so not really good. And total is 3631. All right, so that works. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to extrapolate this formula here. But before I do that, I need to make sure that the range here and here don't move. So I'm going to do F4 on all of my numbers so that, except this one, of course, because I want this one to change, so that the range always stays the same, right? So Control Enter, and then if I double click, I can see that now I have the sum of whatever is in here. So if Tuesday is found here, then add it inside of my sum, whatever number is in this range, as long as it's from this value here. Okay, so same thing here, right? Equals sum if the range of the sum. So this is here, arrow down, and then press F4, and then comma, and then where's the criteria range? Criteria range is, is the year. So Control Shift arrow down, F4, and of course, what is the criteria? I only have one criteria. By the way, I'm using some ifs. Sorry, I didn't explain that. There's some if, which is only one criteria range. And then there's some ifs, which has many criteria. So I could have, let's say, all of 2016, all of Mondays in 2016, right? So I can have multiple range, multiple criteria. And then, of course, my actual criteria. Close the brackets, press enter, and now I have my total for each year, right? Same thing for the quarters. So now you understand why the value of extrapolating or extracting, the data that's in here from here is so that these tables can now be built based on information that would be difficult to get otherwise, right? So equals sum if. I'll just use the sum if regular just because I only have one criteria and one range. So sum ifs, I like sum ifs actually, it's just a Sum range, here we go. F4, and then criteria range here. You get the idea, F4, and then the criteria is right here. Close the brackets. Did I not close the brackets? I guess I erased my information. Criteria range. Sorry about that, guys. F4, comma, criteria, enter. All right, there we go. So now remember, if I want these to look like currency, right? Control Shift and F4, and then automatically it's a currency. Okay. Concatenate versus flash fill. I know that normally we take questions at 10:02, but I'm going to take 2 minutes, right? Flash fill is a button that's found here in data. Flash fill can also be activated with Control E. Here's how it works. If you have data here that you don't have to automatically have updated, you just want to extract things or modify things, you can just use Control E. So if I go Mo, press Enter, Control E, it'll automatically extract by trying to figure out what's going on, right? So let's say I want the last name, Dim, and then the first letter of the first name. Press M, Enter, Control E, and automatically it'll try to do it. So Tran, Gigi, it did it. Bertin, it did it. So it's doing all of these. Sometimes you might have to help Excel a little bit because it's not sure, right? So if I press Control E, then automatically it might skip a place. Did it do it properly? CC, question, bracing. No, I think it did it all well. AP, yeah, DM. So, but sometimes you might have to edit the one of the examples or the second one so that it automatically corrects the assumption that it's making. You can change things, you can add things. So for instance, I could, you know, if we do phone numbers, I could say, well, transfer this 206 space 587 dash 4545, enter, Control E, and automatically, Control E, automatically it will reproduce this. Now this doesn't update, right? If I come and change the number here and I say 4546, this is going to stay 4545. So that's the difference between using flash fill and concatenate. Concatenate is going to join two things together, right? So for instance, in here, if I want the last color, right, which is red, and I go Control E, well, how does it know which red to take here, right? Because it's either or. So here is where I'm going to correct it, green, enter, and automatically it's going to have picked all of the last colors here, right? So if you had something like, you know, LAC dash 905 slash 13, right? So I want to convert a product number here. Well, I can just go to my Control E, and automatically it's going to help me build that list, right? The other thing that you could do is, for instance, is create an email, right? So let's say s.ripper at canada.ca, let's say, canada.ca, right? If I go Control E, automatically it's going to have created my email list. And now, you know, I have to decide if I want the middle name or not, but let's say I'm ignoring the middle name, then automatically it would do that for me. So really, really easy with the flash fill to be able to create things, and you could just copy and paste, right? This is a job for text to column, for instance, right? Where basically what I want to do is I want to go to my data here, go text to column, and say split up by delimitation. So use a comma is what my data is separated with. I go next, actually cancel that. Lets me select the entire data, text to column, next. My data is delimited by commas, and automatically it finds everything. And then it says, sure, where do you want it? I want it here, and finish. And automatically it will extract whatever's in here. Then I can go back to what I was doing with my date and time functions and create a better looking table. Okay. VLookup very quickly. VLookup enables you to take data and go find this data in this table. So for instance here, right, I could say, whenever you see this in here, return something in a second column. The point of the difference between between match and index and VLookup is that if I'm looking for something where the table, the results are behind the table, then unfortunately VLookup is not going to work with that, right? So how does VLookup work? It says take this data. Let me scroll down, right? Take this data and then go look at it in the table. Once you've found it in this table, then give me the second, third, fourth result, right? So if I say part ID part 2, then automatically it goes to part 2, and then I say what's the percentage that I want, then automatically it'll pull it for me. Whereas index and match, and you can just use this function here if you want to break it back to the beginning. Basically what we're doing is we're saying we have again the array here, right? So this is our first array, and then we say match this value here with this number inside of this array, and once you found it, just give me the number, and then that position is going to give me the different menus that are here. So now if I come in here and I say flying range is 20, then automatically it's going to go get the right product for the flying range that I'm looking at, right? So if you have to look in a cell, look up in a cell range, a description or something that is going to give you a result that is somewhere else, this is where you would use a combination of index and match to be able to find it. So just open this cell here, and as soon as you click and you look at the data, you'll understand very quickly how the index and match works. Carl, I went a little bit long. I'm sorry, man.
That's okay, Denis. We will forgive you for that. So we do have a few questions. Maybe what I'll do is maybe just pop to that very concluding slide, the next one there, and on courses, because I understand some may have to go at 3, but we'll spend a few minutes if you're able to stay, Denis, and address a few of the questions. Again, as mentioned,
with pleasure.
Good. As Denis mentioned, a lot of what was covered is spent, some really in-depth time is spent on these in our Excel courses. So if you go to globalknowledge.ca/Excel or .com/Excel for our US friends, you can see a range of courses that are there from an introductory to an advanced level on all 3 versions. And we also have a nice selection of Power BI courses if you're a strong Excel user and are looking to move ahead to that. Leverage it for business intelligence, how you can use the Power BI tools for that. So we certainly encourage you to look that up. We will be sending an email with a recording of this session as well as the template that Denis used, and we'll also include a discount code for an upcoming course, so you'll be able to save a few dollars if you're interested in taking one of those courses. So thank you for that. So let's get to a couple questions then. Ron asked early on in the session, what is the benefit of using an array formula rather than simply copying single formulas down?
Yeah, good question. In today's world, not that much, honestly. The advantage is that what you're doing is you're building the formula very quickly, where you don't have to, instead of just copying 2 cells. This example is very simple, right, where we have this and this. But let's say that you have data that's a little bit spread out on your sheet, right, and it's not side by side. Sometimes just the manipulation of it is easier to apply inside of a table when you're crunching data. That's the short answer for it.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Also a question on the slicer. Again, Ron was asking, you understand the slicer is more user-friendly, but is there any other difference to using the drop-down filters on the columns?
Well, so if I'm using drop-down here, right, first of all, if I click here, I have to come in and click, unclick, right? So if I want this, I click OK, it applies it, I come back in, I select all, and so on. So it's a little bit more involved. There's a little bit more steps to it. Of course, you're using the drop down here. You can filter, you can search through it, right? So you can just search inside of whatever's inside of the drop down. But if you're handing in the report, or you just have, people that don't necessarily want to come in and filter here, by inserting a slicer, right? You just have buttons that you press. Excuse me. And you're able to quickly filter without having to undo your selections inside of the drop down. And it's just prettier, right? I mean, you can just you can have the different buttons to appear. If you're handing in your report to someone who isn't familiar with Excel or is intimidated by Excel, if you give them buttons like this, they'll instantly understand what to do with these. Whereas if you say, well, just go into the filters and figure it out, sometimes that might give them a challenge.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, nice explanation of that feature. Going on to the date, time and date section of the presentation, can you change the format of the date in the today function? So if you want it to read month, day, year instead of day, month, year, can you change that format?
Yeah, so it's not inside of the function, right? So if you go to the today, basically today is it just grabs it, right? Now you can add things to it, you can change the value, but basically what you want is, if you need to change the format, it's in here, right? So this is why we're coming here. If you want to change that format here, right, you can change it very easily by this. If you want to get fancy with your format, you click on the shortcut here, which is the advanced button for number formatting. And in the date here, you'll have all of the different formats that you want, or that are available depending on your country and your language. Or you could come to custom, right? So this format here is exactly this one here, right? So it's this one here, right? So now what you want is to say, well, maybe I want the full year, so I'll put an extra Y in there, and automatically whatever's up here is going to adjust to your format here. So this is more of a cell formatting question than an actual today question.
Okay, good. And while you were in that dialog box, Denis, thanks for that question, Colin. Nancy asked about changing from a 24-hour clock to a 12-hour clock that displays AM and PM.
Yep, here we are. So if you go to the format cells and you go time, to the time formatting, you'll have here 1:30 or 13:30, right? So that's the same thing in English Canada.
Okay. Good. Is flash fill available in the newer version of Excel 2016?
Yeah, flash fill started in 2013, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Okay. And here Ron asked a question actually right where you are there. Sometimes I get this issue and I wonder why some of the dates are right justified, some are left justified, just in that column D there.
Oh, here?
Yeah.
That's because it didn't register the numbers. So this here means that the number is registered as text, and this means that the number is either registered as a date or as text. So you see, if I click on the date here, it says date, and if I click on this here, it says general, right? So this is why even if I change this, right, there's going to be some issues. And normally what you can do is just go check if there's an extra space or anything like that. But one of the easiest ways is just, use the format painter or things like that. But you might have to, depending on what was converted, you might have to do some cleanup here.
Okay.
So if I fix this here, I would basically insert a helper column, right? And I'd go, let's say, because this is not a necessarily a date format, depending on the computer you're using, right? So I'd go 05/05/2016, and I just try to clean it up. If it doesn't clean it up like that, then I would just actually separate my information with a text function and then clean it up. But this is what we talk about when we're talking about data cleanup. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it just doesn't see the data depending on what's there. It doesn't see it the way that we want it.
Okay. Is there a difference between using a pivot table in Excel and using the Power Pivot, the Power BI tool? Not sure if there's a quick answer to that.
Yeah. Well, so very quickly, if you're familiar with pivot tables, you know that you can just grab information from a table and you can just grab the title and you can just punch it in. The advantage of Power Pivot is that you can actually have a data model, which means you can pull from different tables simultaneously in the same pivot. And once you've added the different tables, you can actually add a data model to it. So for instance, if this date here or this product here was the same in this table and the other table, then basically what I would do is I would add a relationship in between this field in this table and this same field in another table, so that when I pull the product from my fields, it would automatically use both the sales from this table, let's say 2016 sales and 2015 sales, for instance, and then it would pull both of those. So it enables you with Power Pivot to create relationships and multiple tables. And of course, there's quite a bit more in the data model that you can do, but that's the 25-cent answer.
Okay, thank you. And we'll do one more question. I like this one. Paul asked if there's much point anymore to the concatenate function, when the ampersand seems to accomplish most of the same function and seems less cumbersome.
In terms of cleanliness and in terms of being able to read what's going on, when you're using the concatenate function, especially if you're using the function builder, right, you'll have an easier time being able to go and select your information. You don't have to type anything extra. It'll put the quotes in for you, right? So if I'm selecting some information here, it'll automatically go and grab the information. If I say hello, right, and I go tap, it automatically puts the quotes in for me. So you're right, and then I'll say I think it's just an easier input.
So again, thank you everybody, especially Denis. Thank you for sharing us with your expertise with us. I think we all benefited and our Excel skills just bumped up that much more. So we thank you for this.